Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Yapyat Sarvam, Trailokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Twameva Mata Chapita Twameva, Twameva Bandhuscha Sakha Twameva, Twameva Vedya Dravinam Twameva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Marupena Sansitaha, Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sansitaha, Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Sansitaha, Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Lakshmi Rupena Sansitaha, Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. So that's an especially sacred chant this evening because we're in the midst of Navaratri, 9 days where we worship Durga, the mother, who also manifests herself as Tripuri, the goddess who is the mystery of the 3 cities. And just the aspects of her that we worship, for those who don't know the Sanskrit: Ma Rupena, of the form of the Divine Mother; Shakti Rupena, of the form of energy, Shakti; Buddhi Rupena, of the form of wisdom, the enlightened state of mind; and Lakshmi Rupena, of the form of the wealth, of all the qualities of a fit student. This is the real meaning of Lakshmi. Doesn't mean money. It means the inner wealth. Shatsambhava. All right, so we are in the 2nd chapter, and here Dattatreya, our guru, is talking about the value of inquiry, of investigation. All that is good comes by means of vichara, vicharena, by means of investigation. So we finished up with, I guess it was 51, 52, and now we're doing 52, 53 in chapter 2. Can you give us a page number?
23.
All right, and would you help us out, Ganesh?
Avichara paro mrityuhu vichara ahata janaha vimrishya karijayati sarvatra bhishta sangamat. Absence of investigation is the final death. People are killed by the absence of investigation. One who does, after having investigated, is victorious everywhere on account of his meeting with the desired object.
Yes. So finding out what's really going on is the harbinger of great success in this world. I'm always reminded of the scientist Galileo when he was looking through early telescopes and was astounded to see the face of the moon and the rings of Saturn, and most importantly, the moons of Jupiter. So he was able to be convinced that in fact the earth was round, the moon revolved around it, and then the idea of a heliocentric solar system. He was friends with the Pope. Pope let him get away with this because this particular cosmology was not accepted by the church in Europe at the time. And then doctors of the church, people who were great scholars of theology, came to see Galileo and said, dude, you can't talk like this anymore. We're going to throw you in jail. And Galileo said, look through the telescope. Look. And the doctors of the church said, we don't have to look. We see with the eyes of faith. Swamiji used to say, blind faith is stupid faith and will fail us in a crisis. Real spirituality is profound common sense in the end. Really investigating what's really going on. Now, in our stories of the Buddha, he really couldn't find a teacher. I don't know if it's because he was unusually stubborn or at his particular time and place in India, he couldn't find a man of wisdom. Tried a bunch of different paths, finally said, I'm going to sit here and investigate and find out what's really true for me. And he's a great example that in the end, we do the work ourselves. It's our own investigation. What are we investigating? Koham, who am I? What is bondage? Why do I suffer? What is this world? How has it come about? These are the great, profound questions that the scriptures invite us to investigate into. They give us signposts, pointers, go this way. You might try checking out this particular avenue of thinking. That's all they really do. We must investigate ourselves. And if we don't investigate, we're like the fools, the doctors of the church, who could not look through a telescope. I remember back at the early 19th century, no, early 20th century, I lied. I think it was 1903. And all the physicists of the day said that powered, heavier than air flight was a physical impossibility. And they had all the formula to prove it. Well, the Wright brothers never got the memo. Sure enough, they were able to build a machine that was powered, had a dude in it, and began powered flight. 60 years later, we were going to the moon. That's what's so amazing. Next verse.
Jim, quick comment. I think I messed up. I don't think we're on 52. I looked at the wrong chapter. Ganesh was right. I think we may have been on 27.
Well, let's back up and do 27. We're still talking about investigation. 27 then.
Sarva kartavyaihi.
No,
Sarva kartavya aikalyam. Amrita samsavad padananditah kathametam dasham prapto yacha mamaha tatpura. We are on verse 27 in chapter 7, Zusli.
I was going to say, I have notations of the last class, and we were on 53.
In chapter 2?
Oh.
No, I think we were on 53 at the end of the previous class. That was chapter 1,
Oh.
I believe.
Sorry about that.
Where are we? I didn't mark it. Are we on 27 or 53?
This is
I
Mark.
think we're finally correct now. 27 is right.
27 is right.
27
All
is
right. So we're talking about obligatory actions, kartavya. So read the English, please.
He was delighted by tasting the nectar that is the non-existence of all obligatory tasks. How did he obtain this state, which he told me at that time formally?
Okay, so we're back referring to the sage Samvarta. Remember our story here, Parashurama, after being defeated by Lord Rama, is dejected. He goes along the road, he meets the great sage Samvarta, who speaks briefly the transcendental truth. Parashurama's mind is too gross to understand it, so he continues on. Samvarta sends him to Dattatreya. Dattatreya says, oh, this kid's got a mind like a brick. Here, I'm going to give you a marvelous upasana, the worship of the mother. Go do this. So Parashurama does it for 12 years, which burns up all his grosser handicaps so that his mind becomes more sattvic. Then he comes back and is now talking to Dattatreya. What did Samvarta say? I'm not sure I understood it. And he's remarking that Samvarta was a divine idler. He had nothing to do. He didn't have that inner, I've got to do this in order to be happy. I've got to do that in order to be okay. That's gone. 28.
Sarvametat sukripaya guru me vaktumarhasi kartavya kala bhujagani girnam ma vemocha girnam mam vimochaya. Lord, you should tell me all this on your compassion. Liberate me who am swallowed up by the black serpent of obligatory tasks.
So here Parashurama is saying, I am now under this kartavya, this sense that I must do things. And here we're not talking about, it's my duty in life to take care of my kids, or it's my duty in life to help my wife out, or something like that. We're talking about this inner state in our bosom where it's not okay. The world's not okay. I'm not okay. And I must fix it. there's a marvelous paradigm that's put forward in Yoga Vasishta. We may have talked about this last week. I can't remember. Yoga Vasishta reduces our suffering to 3 ideas. The first is Jiva Bhavana. I think I'm a person. Specifically, I think I'm my body. With that feeling is always a sense of feeling incomplete. I love it that some people call it the God-shaped hole in our hearts. The second idea is some sort of a goal. And the goal only takes one of 2 forms. I either need to fix the world or I need to fix me. If only I have more, better, different out there, then it'll be okay. Or if I were fatter, if I were thinner, if I were smarter, if I were better looking, if I were lighter, if I were darker. All these things, that's going to make the difference. And the third idea is this kartavya, this compulsion to act with insistence. Here Parashurama says, I am under this tyranny. Help me, O Guruji. Next one.
Ityuktva charanau मूर्ध्ना गृहीत्वा दण्डवन्नतः अथ दृष्ट्वा तथा भूतं भार्गवं मुक्तिभाजनं दयमानः स्वभावोऽथ दत्तो वक्तुम् upakramat. Having spoken thus and taking hold of his feet with his head, Parashurama bowed, prostrating like a stick.
I think we've done these, haven't we? Maybe not. Okay, go ahead.
Actually, we have. You're right. I remember this.
I remember the bowing like the stick.
Yeah, I remember bowing like a stick. You're right. Okay. Then seeing Bhargava, who was a fit person for liberation in that condition, Dattatreya of compassionate nature began to speak.
Okay, going on.
Vatsa Bhargava dhanyosi yasyate buddhiri drishi abdhau nimajjato nauka samprapti riva sangata etavadeva sukritihi kriyabhi rupasangatah swatmanam arahoyati pade paramapavane. Son Bhargava, you to whom perception of this kind has come, like the acquisition of a boat by a person who is sinking into the ocean, are fortunate. So much alone is auspiciousness that one who is associated with religious rites raises himself up to the highest purified state.
So here he says, your religious ritual, your upasana, your worship of the mother has accomplished its purpose, which is to purify your mind and begin to turn it towards investigation. It's accomplished its purpose. Now, the turning of the mind within towards investigation ultimately only comes by God's grace. But we invoke God's grace by our practice. And I think we've talked about this. It doesn't have to just be worship of the mother. Whatever form of practice that appeals to you, it can be karma yoga, it can be doing yoga asana, it can be acts of selfless service. All of these things are useful and helpful. They will not in and of themselves liberate us, though. What they do is help us achieve a sattvic temperament. And when the mind has a predominance of sattva, it begins to turn within. Next one.
Sa Devi Tripura Sarva Hridaya Kasha Rupini Ananya Sharanam Bhaktam Pratyevam Rupini Drutam Hridayantah Parinata Mochayed Mrityu. That goddess Tripura is of the nature of the space of the heart, since she manifests as consciousness therein in everyone. She, manifesting within the heart in the form of discriminating perception or buddhi in a devotee who has taken refuge in her without any other person as recourse, can liberate him quickly from the snare of death.
So if we abandon everything and rely solely on God, things happen very quickly. Now, in the first part of the verse here, our poet has begun to give us intimation.
I think we lost Jim.
There. It stopped?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. It was my phone. So here we need to talk about the spiritual heart. It's not the physical heart. We don't even mean the Hridaya chakra, the heart chakra. The heart here, first of all, the reason the ancients would talk about the self residing in the heart, there's just something about humans that when someone is asked to gesture to themselves, they'll say, which one of you is Jim? Nobody goes, I'm Jim. I'm Jim. No, we go, it's me. And we tend to gesture to our heart. So because they saw that as a way in which people behave, the idea was the heart was the center of our identity in the physical body. But we want to take it to a deeper level, what the Hridaya is, the spiritual heart. When the intellect is quiescent and free, and by intellect here I mean the discursive mind, the place where thoughting happens, but also when the emotional nature is free from all struggling. The mind, the intellect and the mind have merged. We call that the spiritual heart. And then oftentimes we hear the term Hridaya Guhyam, the cave of the heart. So like in a bear cave, the bear is content, the cave is context. In a lion's cave, the lion is content, the cave is context. So with us human beings, thought and feeling are content. Yes, content. But what is context? It's the awareness that we begin to initially perceive when the discursive intellect is quietened All this struggling ends. In this radical reversal of the attentive faculty, I begin to see that, oh, my mind is not aware. I am awareness. When I'm aware of thoughts and feelings, I call it mind. But that's a descriptive of the content, not the ground of being. That's the context. The Upanishads thunder. I am Atma, Brahma. This self is Brahman. So that awareness that is vast and empty and spacious is the place where we see this self, the ground of being of the whole creation, the same thing. This is Tripuri, this is the goddess. Now, that silent land, that vast emptiness is always subtly calling the mind inward. Come home. Come home. And that call becomes clearer when we've begun to silence that compulsive extroversion that gets scrubbed away through the various upasanas that we may do. So again, it's by the goddess's grace that we begin this inward journey. But we invoke that grace by our own purushartha, our own self-effort. Armchair grace is not effective. Oh, it's all God's grace, so I'm just going to sit here in my chair and have a glass of wine, watch Netflix, and, maybe grace will show up by 10. If not, I guess no grace today. No. We invoke it through our practice. All right, next verse.
Yavat kartavya vetala anna pibheti tridam naraha natavat sukhamapnoti vetala vishtavatsada. As long as a man is not very much afraid of the ghost of obligatory tasks, so long he does not obtain any happiness, like one possessed by an evil spirit always.
So we're always needing to do something. And this kartavya gets subtler and subtler. Where we see it in its purest form frequently is when we sit in meditation and you go to sit and you're squirmy. My God, is it over yet? Oh, I don't know why I do this, and then you start thinking about, I've got to do this at the office, and I've got this project to do, and I just can't do this meditation business. That pressure, that vasana pressure that keeps us from being able to enter into silence. That's what's behind this kartavya, this obligatory action. As long as it's going on, we're always under the tyranny. I'll be happy when, it will be better if, more, better, Gimme, 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 gimme. Next one.
Nranam kartavya kala hi tandashtanam katham shubham karala karajja karala karalajwala akrantanga ana akranga karala karalajwala akrantangana nivapachet. How can there be happiness anywhere for those men bitten by the black serpent of obligatory tasks, as for those whose bodies have been overcome by the flames of a dreadful poison?
Yes. So the idea is, even if you have a feast in front of you, if you have a thorn in your throat, it's of no value. You may be the wealthiest person in the world, but if you're sick and can't leave the house, it's of no value. We have lots and lots of images that illustrate this. So as long as we think, I have to do this in order to be happy, it's like tyranny. It's like tyranny. No rest, no peace. Going on.
Kartavya Vishasamsargam Urchitam Pashya Vaijagat Andhi Bhutam na janati Kriyam Swasya Hitatmikam. See the world become senseless and blind by contact with the poison of obligatory tasks. It does not know the practice which is of the nature of its own well-being.
Is not the nature of its own what?
It does not know the practice which is of the nature of its own well-being.
Yes, so the idea is, the more we get, the more we want. It's the weird thing that's the law of diminishing returns. And I have a very dear friend, and a couple years ago, he graduated from UC Berkeley. Really smart kid, microbiology degree. And his first job out of the university was as an Uber driver. Just wanting to see, what do I want to do when I grow up? He's in his early 20s at this point. Finally decides to look for a real job, get his career going. Wasn't sure he wanted to stay in microbiology. So he gets a job with this lab as research assistant 2. And he was overjoyed. It's a good company. He's making a real salary for the first time. Now, less than a year at the job, complaining, I'm doing things my manager ought to be doing, and I should be a research assistant 1, and they're making all this money and I'm not, and blah, 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 you know. No satisfaction. No satisfaction. And I know that if he got the better job, if that's the way the mind works, the kartavya is still there. Who's ever made enough money? As long as we think out there is what's going to make me happy, it's a never ending rat race. Now, yoga is not saying that you should live an indolent life, but wear your life like a loose garment. It's all going to work out. Just smash the idea that stuff is going to give you real satisfaction, real peace. It isn't. Don't believe me. Look to your own experience. This is where we're ahead of ourselves. Vichara is of so much importance. Investigate. I frequently talk about the president. I'm not going to say a word about policies. I'm only going to say, look at his face. This is a man who operates from a paradigm that money, power, and prestige, domination, revenge, status, he thinks these will make him happy. And those of you who've been here in my living room know I have a portrait of Ramana Maharshi on the wall. I always like to say, look at a photo of Donald Trump, look at a photo of Ramana Maharshi, and you tell me who has what you want. And I only mention the president because he's such an extreme case. Someone who has striven for money, power, and prestige that hasn't made him happy. I don't think so. But I don't think so. And it's not just he. You can look at people in your lives. You too can have stress and obligation. You too can be filled with the fear of losing all your stuff. I don't want that life. Kartavya. Under the tyranny of obligatory action. Next one.
Anyatha cheshtate bhuyo moham apadhyate punaha evam vidho hi lokoyam kartavya vishamurchitaha anadikalato bhime achyate vishasagare. It acts in a different manner repeatedly and again attains to delusion. This mankind of such a kind has indeed become senseless by the poison of obligatory tasks and is burnt in the terrible ocean of poison from time without beginning.
So you may be tired of the Honda, so you get the Audi. That didn't do it.
Jim?
I think we lost.
Hello?
Yeah, you're back. But your
Okay.
picture is not. Okay, your picture.
Can you see me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you start with the Honda, and then after a while, no, that doesn't do it. I'll get the Audi. You don't like the Audi, so then you want the Tesla. So you get the Tesla. So we keep thinking always what's wrong is I don't have a big enough this or expensive enough that. over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. And the more we get caught in that trap, the harder we have to work, the more stressful the rat race. For what? Swamiji always used to talk about how those people in America look down on India because of America thinks it has a higher standard of living. And Swamiji would say, but does it have a higher standard of life? Where are its values? And I always think of the story of the emperor's clothes, the emperor's new clothes. That people are full of stress and unwilling to even admit it, maybe to a loved one. Next one.
Yatha hi kechit pathikaah prapta Vindhyamahanagam Shudha Bharasamakranta Palani Tadrushurvane Vishamushthi Phalanyashu Tindukasya Phalehaya Bhakshayam Asuratyanta Shuddhanashta Tasendriyaha. As for example, some travelers who reached the great mountain of Vindhya, overcome by excess of hunger, saw in the forest some fruits. On account of their desire for Tinduka fruits, which are edible, they quickly ate the fruits of Vishamushti, a poisonous non-edible fruit, with their sense of taste lost by extreme hunger.
So the idea is when we are longing, wanting so desperately, we even then begin to lose sight of what really is destructive. You know, I'm so stressed out, I'm so fearful. Little crystal meth might take the edge off of it. And down the road we go. Oh, just some Valium will help. Only 10 tonight. We go down these roads. Why? Because we do not have the capacity to endure the terrible discomfort of the craving mind. So painful, so painful. We think the way to fix the craving mind is to soothe it. And yoga says, let's uproot the problem. Next one.
Athate Tadvishajvala Jwalitanga Supiditaha Andhibhuta Vichinvatta Tadvishonna Prashantaye Avidetva Mushtiphalam Tindu Phalanishenavat Matva Jwalam Nije Dehe Dhattura Phalamasaduhu Bhrantya Buddhyata Sarvai Prasiyat tu bhakshitim. Then they whose bodies were burnt by the flames of the poison of that fruit were tormented and became blind, searching for the abatement of the heat of that poison, and not knowing the poisonous mushti fruits as the cause of their predicament, and considering the burning in their body as due to the use or eating of the tindu fruit, they met with dhatura fruits, white thorn apples. By mistake, that fruit was eaten by everybody with the belief that it was a citron fruit, a lemon like edible fruit.
So we keep going from one tormenting situation to another, thinking that's going to fix it. And this is what in our modern society we would call the addictive personality, the person caught up in the cycle of addiction. And okay, maybe you have a problem, you drink too much. And if you don't deal with the root of it, okay, I'm fixed my drinking, but now all of a sudden I find myself at the casino every weekend. And the next thing I know is I'm $150,000 in debt. So, I finally get on top of my gambling problem. And the next thing I know is I'm on Tinder or Grindr. And I ruin my family because I'm addicted to sex. And we keep having this transfer of addiction because we haven't struck at the root of the problem. We can't deal with this just by handling the symptoms. It doesn't work. What is my problem? I'll be happy when. It'll be better if. If I sit still, I'm so uncomfortable. More, better, different. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Tragic state of the world. And there are some addictions, if we're going to use that word, which are much more socially acceptable. Oh, yes, I work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. I wear that as a badge of courage. I have no friends. I have no life. I work all day long and come home and maybe zone out, watching Netflix, go to bed, get up and do it all over again. I love the word vacation. My life is so awful, I need to vacate it. That's how so many of us live. Next one.
Unmattascha tato bhuvan margat भ्रष्टाश्च ते तदा अन्धीभूयाति गहने पतन्तो निम्नभूमिषु कण्टकैश्छिन्न सर्वाङ्गा भग्नबाहु रूपादकाः अधिक्षिप्तन्त अधिक्षिपन्तच्छान्योन्यं कलहं चक्रचकैः. Consequently, they become intoxicated and then strayed away from their path, becoming blind in the impenetrable forest, falling into pits, with their entire bodies pierced by thorns and their hands and feet broken. They quarreled, loudly abusing each other.
So that's what tends to happen when we get further and further down the road of this addictive relationship with life. We suffer more and more. Then what do? We start blaming other people. I'm a victim. It's all your fault that I'm suffering. No capacity to investigate, to say, what am I doing wrong? I like to say, if you meet one jerk during the day, bad luck. If you meet two jerks during the day, coincidence. But if you meet three jerks during the day, guess who's the jerk? But the ordinary person, no capacity for self-reflection. It's all out there. Next one.
मुष्टिभिश्च शिलाभिश्च काष्ठैर्जघ्नुः परस्परम् अथ ते दीर्णसर्वाङ्गाः पुरं कश्चित् समासदुः. They struck each other with sticks, stones, and their fists. Then they reached a city with all their bodies torn.
So these poor people, after they've been destroying each other because of their pain, very important thing to understand. Hurt people hurt people. Father screams at number one son. Number one son smacks number two son. Number two son kicks number three son. Number three son kicks the dog. That's what we do. Oh, so-and-so, he's just a terrible man. He beats his wife. Ask what happened to him as a child. Was he abused? In the Hebrew scripture, there's a saying, the sins of the father are visited upon the sons, even to the second and third generation. It doesn't mean that children are punished by God for the sins of a parent or grandparent. It means that this brokenness, these wounds, are passed on from generation to generation. We learn this behavior. One of the statistics that I find interesting, if you're the child of an alcoholic, there's a 50% chance that you'll either become an alcoholic or marry one. And understand, okay, there's a genetic predisposition for alcoholism. Why in God's name would the child of an alcoholic marry one? Because it's familiar. Because the unconscious acts in ways we don't even know. So these fellows going to the city, I mean, it sounds like a fanciful story, but that's you and me. That's you and me. Now let's find out if there's any salvation for them. Going on.
निशीथे दैववशतः पुरद्धारम् उपाययुः पुरद्वारधिपालैस्ते प्रतिरुद्धा प्रवेशने. Providentially, they arrived at the entrance to the city at midnight. They were interrupted at the entrance by the gatekeepers of the city.
Going on.
Deshakala भिज्ञाना कलहं चक्रुरुच्चकैः अथ ते प्रहृता द्वार पालैरतितरां यदा तदा पलायनः पार बभूवुः परितस्तु ते पतिताः परिखे केचिद् भक्षिता मकरादिभिः. Due to non-recognition of place or time, they quarreled loudly, and when they were beaten very much by the gatekeepers, then they became intent on running away in all directions. Some of them, falling into the moat on the outskirts of the city, were eaten up by crocodiles and the like.
So the end result for many of us is destruction. How many jails, institutions, mortuaries are filled with people who have so gone down this road that they've destroyed themselves and their lives. Next one.
केचित् खातेषु कूपेषु पतिताः प्राणमुत्सृजः अपरे तैर्विनिहताः केचिज्जीविग्रहं गताः. Some, falling into ditches and wells, gave up their lives. Some others, wounded by them, went away alive.
So many people following this path of compulsion end up dying or institutionalized. The rest of us live lives of quiet desperation. We have a living death. Come home and go through half a quart of vodka at night. That'll do it. Numb out. Going on.
एवं जना हितेच्छाभिः कर्तव्य विषमूर्छिताः अहो विनाशं यान्त्युच्चैः मोहेनान्धिकृताः खलु. Alas, thus people, due to their desire for well-being, insensible due to the poison of obligatory tasks, and made blind by delusion, indeed go to ruin very much.
So that's the way of this world, all rooted in this profound, illusory idea that the way to deal with the sense of emptiness, of longing, of incompleteness is stuff, people, places, things, and conditions. And even if we get some of it, it's always temporary. So we make a distinction between what we call bhoga and yoga. The bhogi wants to be happy. He thinks that the way to be happy is to satisfy as many desires as possible. The end result is more desire. A yogi is one who practices yoga. A yogi also wants to be happy, but she engages in a way of life that reduces the number of desires entertained. And what's left is space, peace, freedom. Santosha, contentment. two different paths. Those of us who've studied Kathopanishad, Yama, when he starts off his discussion, says two pathways approach a person, Shreyas and Preyas. Swamiji used to say the electable versus the delectable, the preferable versus just the pleasurable. Now, the good news in the end is if we continue along the spiritual path, the electable starts to become preferable. And this is what is known as subhaj, auspicious desire. Going on.
Dhanyosi bhargavatvam tu yasmad abhyudayam gataha vichara sarvamulam hi sopanam pratamam bhavet parashreyo mahasaudha prapto janihi sarvatha suvicharamrite kshema prapti kasya katham bhavet. Bhargava, but you are blessed since you have arrived at good fortune. Investigation is indeed the root or basis of everything. Know that in every way it can become the foremost ladder in reaching the great mansion of supreme felicity. Without proper investigation, how can there be the attainment of happiness, and by whom?
Yes. So now he's saying that rather than going down the road of bhoga, let's go down the road of yoga. And what do we need? So he is, in other words, saying the same thing that Shankara says when he talks about the qualifications of a fit student. The first qualification of a fit student is viveka, which Shankara defines as that firm conviction in the intellect that Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, Brahman alone is real, and the phenomenal world is mithya, illusion, at best a conditioned reality. It will not give us anything real. The second qualification, vairagya. That desire, doesn't mean we get it overnight, we work on it, to give up all attachments to enjoyments gained through the senses and all identifications with any form of self, starting with the body, up to and including the form of Brahma, Shankara says. Meaning I want to be a Superman or a powerful person or something like that. And this viveka and vairagya are the two wings of the Hansa, the great swan that takes us on the flight to the infinite. And so through investigating the world, seeing its dosha, its defect, we begin to develop mature vairagya. Okay, what number was that?
That was 51-52. So we should start on the verse that we started today, 53 next week.
Okay, we're back to where we started. Okay, We have a few minutes. Shall we have time for questions? Do we have any questions? So your assignment is, as you're moving through your life, see if you can see where this kartavya arises. Am I engaging in a project because I think this is what's going to make me happy? Or am I doing it just out of the joy of doing it? Or as service to the world? Or have I held out, this is where the juice is? Again, as Shankara says, you're not going to let go of it overnight. We don't flip these things off like a light switch. First thing we want to do is begin to see the process. One more time, any questions? All right, let's meditate then.